Hey guys, my name is Albert Ellison III. I'm a screenwriter, producer, and award-winning director. I'm currently in production and on set of my first feature film, The Profession. In the description below the video, you can find a link to my free screenplay guide, which is an outline of the first 10 lessons in this course and every fundamental element to screenwriting. These are worksheets you can fill out as we discuss the topics, so you might be able to retain the information better. It's my gift to you, so submit your email and you'll find the package in your inbox. Get your hands on the worksheet before we proceed into this episode. Previously, we looked at creating the core of a character through their beliefs, needs, and wants. Creating that foundation is absolutely necessary for this next step on how to craft character arcs. The execution of character arcs are what bring meaning to your story. Character arcs are not difficult to understand, but it's vital to understand the core steps within a proper character arc so your story can be explored and fulfilled to its greatest potential. Quote, "Character arcs are ultimately the whole point of fiction. The change, the journey from one spiritual, emotional, intellectual place to another is the story of humanity." End quote. K.M. Wieland. The change a character takes expresses the reason the story exists in the first place. In the last episode, I mentioned the arc is when a character begins in one place around your circle, but then, through discovering a truth, ends up somewhere else. The statement you as the artist makes on your topic is expressed through where the end of your protagonist's character arc lands. It takes the framework of the philosophical conflict and makes a statement within it through compelling arguments. For example, in Whiplash, directed by Damien Chazelle, Neil, our protagonist, is being torn between giving up and settling or sacrificing everything in the pursuit of greatness. He is constantly torn between whether or not this is worth it because his family relationships are shattering. It hurts losing his girlfriend. But by the end of the film, he comes to believe that greatness is the only cause worth living for. He comes to truly believe that if one doesn't pursue greatness, then they will not be fulfilled. He abandons the notions of his father for this new path, and that is an argument made by the film, even though there are nuanced, equally respected arguments on both sides. In Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, directed by Spike Jonze, Joel is torn between whether keeping the memories of his loved ones is worth it despite all the pain, or if he would rather wipe them clean and start fresh, finding happiness in his blank slate. The film appropriately addresses both sides of the coin, showing pros and cons to each, but by the end of the film, Joel learns that mistakes, troubles, and pain is an essential part of life, and that keeping those who he loves is worth that. Change creates dramatic narrative. Change in belief creates meaning. In this video, I'll be taking some theory from Creating Character Arcs by K.M. Wieland, which is a great resource for character arc structure and execution. I'll be giving you a theory lesson, but I'm also going to lay out my own diagram for character arcs and break it down to its most fundamental. It's commonly understood that there are three core types of character arcs: the positive change arc, the flat arc, the negative change arc. First, let's look at the positive change arc. The core of this character arc is broken down into three simple steps. When the story begins, the character believes a lie. This false lie is challenged when they encounter the truth. The character overcomes this lie by finding and accepting the truth. Pretty easy, right? One of the most important elements to making a positive change arc believable is to implement something we call a ghost or a wound. This is the off-screen history of a character that reinforces why a character believes the lie that they do at the beginning of the story. You must present it in a way where they are grounded in the lie, in a personal manner, rather than it being a distant belief. For examples of positive change arcs, watch either Seven by David Fincher or The Matrix by the Wachowskis. The flat arc takes a different approach to the change in story. In this method, the protagonist is a character who has already discovered this pivotal truth, and instead of changing throughout the film, they are the vessel for change in the world around them. Their belief not only helps them overcome trials and tribulations of the film, but it is reinforced by them. The flow of the arc goes like this. Character believes the truth is tested, they hold on to the truth. Similar to how a ghost is vital to making a convincing positive change arc, there is a supporting anchor to the flat arc as well that makes it convincing. As they are tested, they must become more vocal. Their beliefs must have more self-evident impact on the world around them. Daniel Plainview gets richer and richer and richer as he goes harder and harder after being humiliated and alienated from his family. Watch There Will Be Blood, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, for an example of a flat change arc. The negative change arc is similar in structure to the other two arcs, but it has some variation. First, we can look at what we call the disillusionment arc. This is the exact same flow as the positive change arc. There's a lie that the character holds on to. That lie is tested as they encounter the truth, and then here the change is that the truth they have come to accept is a tragedy, and they end in a more unfortunate place than they started. Again, supported by a solid reason they would begin inside the belief of the lie. For examples of disillusionment arcs, watch either Sicario or No Country for Old Men. The second variation of the negative change arc is called the fall arc. This character begins in a lie, they are exposed to the truth, but they reject the truth and fall into a deeper and/or worse lie. This arc needs to be supported by motivation that would make it believable for them to fall into this greater lie. History of trauma or abuse is a common example. Watch X-Men First Class for an example of a fall arc. The last type of negative change arc is called the corruption arc. The character starts out surrounded by the truth. At a weak moment, they reject the truth, and then they embrace the lie. Watch either The Godfather or the television series Breaking Bad for examples of the corruption arc. The vital support of this arc is that the character must find something good or valuable within the lie, lest he would never abandon the truth for it. A character will not abandon the truth for no reason. Michael in The Godfather believes in the importance of family, so he's willing to dip back into their regime when his father is injured. Walter White in Breaking Bad believes that he needs to provide for his family, and the only way to do that in the time that he has is to dip into the criminal underworld. Now that's a lot of theory, a lot of options to choose from for your character. What I want to now break away from is saying that all of these are the only way character arcs can happen. These are certainly useful structures, but I think there's a more straightforward and valuable way to look at character arcs and why they are important. You may have noticed an emerging pattern I was emphasizing through all of these examples, and that exact pattern is what I would like to suggest is the key to a properly executed character arc. Initial understanding, they are tested, a new understanding, all supported by believable reasons for their beliefs and changes. Using this framework as a starting point will both free you up from obligations in your story and clear your head from too much theory as you are a novice in writing. You will avoid the roadblocks of having to adhere to beat-for-beat progressions and instead think about the meaning of the progression. Fit the arc that your character takes to the meaning of the story and what you want to say about it. Make a compelling argument and land it effectively with the arc your character takes. Make sure to always support your character with believable history and motivations, lest their journey won't be bought by the audience, and they will be pulled out of the story because they can't buy it. In some cases, I find character arcs can have different interpretations to different people. For instance, I have heard many people argue whether the ending of Whiplash is a good or a bad ending, a negative or a positive ending. The reason I'm interjecting this is not to express that you should make your arcs fuzzy or unbased, but exactly the opposite. Damien Chazelle made a philosophical conflict so strong that the very moral nature of that argument is disputed far and wide based upon each individual's personal worldview. It's also an example that you don't have to follow a painfully obvious formula at times, but he still adhered to each of the steps in my fundamental character arc diagram. Initial understanding, they are tested, a new understanding, supported by believable reasons for their beliefs and changes.
You can get my free screenplay guide in the description below. Submit your email to receive that as we continue into this recap.
Character arcs are ultimately the whole point of fiction. The change, the journey from one spiritual, emotional, intellectual place to another, is the story of humanity. Creating Character Arcs by K.M. Wieland. Change creates dramatic narrative. Change in belief creates meaning. Character arcs are all about changing what a character believes over the course of a story through the events of the plot. All characters must be vessels of change. If they themselves do not change, then they must be the conduit in which the world changes around them. Change happens by a character's beliefs being tested by the other characters and events of the story. This is the key to bringing the character to a point of enlightenment about their need, as discussed in the last chapter. The conclusion of the character arc, the place a character lands by the end, needs to be the final point in your argument towards the philosophical conflict. This is the end note of the film, the takeaway. Whether your character changes positively, negatively, or holds true to their initial beliefs and changes the world around them, these are the key steps to properly execute a character arc. Initial understanding, they are tested, a new understanding, supported by believable reasons for their beliefs and changes.
Thank you all for listening to this episode. If you did find it helpful or informative in any way, please leave it a like. But if you thought it could have been better, leave it a thumbs down so that I know to do better next time.
Stay tuned for the next episode where we'll be talking about the purpose of conflict.